Okay, so okay, so we were learning the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch. So if the owner is traveling with the rental of the chattel of the, let's say you're renting a truck and the driver is with you who owns the truck, so then you are permitted to switch the terms of the rental, so that, let's say, if you sell the merchandise, you can sublet the truck to somebody else because the driver's with you. But the im ein habalam holchim imahim eno rashai lahaskiro laacher shalom midaito ad sheyelechu ba'atzmo imahim lamakom ploni sha'az mutar. So he says, but if the owner of the truck or the donkey or whatever it is not traveling with you, then you don't have a right to sublet it to someone else, but you have to continue the journey together with the truck and the merchandise, even though the other guy purchased it already. Okay. Sha'az mutar, afal pisha, he says, to the destination. Sha'az mutar, because then it would be permitted for you to switch and to, because you've accomplished the journey. Afal pisha ha'acher molich schora acheres rak sheshava mishkala l'rishona. And as long as the merchandise that is being loaded up on the truck is equal in weight to the original merchandise, V'hu hadin im echad b'bnei bneiso holech imahem kamo shenizbara b'hilchos metzia upikadam. And the same thing will be true if even the owner himself is not traveling with you, but one of his family members. The halacha is the same as will be explained or has been explained in the laws of Mitzia and Pikadam. Shekol hamafkid al das ishto ubanav shal nifkad hu mafkid. Sheyu ne'emanim ala Pikadam kamohu. He says, because when you entrust someone else with an object, the other family members of a person have the same status as the person himself as far as being able, from a halachic standpoint. Let's say, for example, we learned in Hilchos Hashavas Aveda that if I return something to an owner, I'm allowed to return it to his wife or to his child, as long as they're an adult child. That's considered to fulfill your obligation to return. So the same thing is true that when it comes to this halacha, that as long as the owner is traveling together with the delivery transport, so then you're allowed to sublet it and change the terms of the rental mid-route. And that would be true if one of his family members is present as well. V'nimsa shadayin pikdonim hu b'rushuso shel zeh haneman etzlo v'lo misaro b'yad acher ve'ein lahem alav afilu tarumos klal. And therefore, it would turn out that the object is still considered to be in the hands of the person who is trustworthy to the owner, because the family member is there and it was never switched over to somebody else. And there's not even a right to complain. See, before we had said, let's see. Right. So as long as one of the family members is present, so then I'm not sure if I understand why the Ein Lahem Love El Afilu Tarumos Klal. There's no complaint at all. I guess we'll see in the Imrei Yaakov exactly what the case is over there. So let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov. Umechara. So in a situation where the original lessee is interested in renting a truck to transport merchandise that he owns. As we explained yesterday, he sold the merchandise en route. And so the new owner is going to come in the middle of the journey and wants to take over the transport from Minsk to Pinsk. So the halacha states that as long as the owner of the truck is the driver, he has no right to prevent the switch in the rental of the truck. Okay? So what we're talking about is a person who rents a boat or a truck, whatever this case may be, and he sells that right of lease to somebody else. And so what we're explaining is that if this purchaser, or it doesn't even have to be that I sold the merchandise, it could be that I decide I'm going to unload my merchandise and let another guy load up his merchandise that's similar in nature, similar weight. So the owner of the boat does not have a right to prevent that from happening. The only thing he can do is grumble or complain, because maybe he'll say, this is a big pain in the neck. I didn't bargain for this. I got to wait an extra few minutes for you to unload your stuff and for him to load up his stuff. Okay, but it'll take an extra hour. All right, so you want to grumble, so grumble. Or you were more happy with me being your customer instead of that other guy being your customer because he's not as nice and whatever. So there's no complaint that he can make. Obviously, it has to be a similar kind of transport. If one guy's transporting widgets and the other guy's transporting hogs, let's say, so then obviously the guy can put a stop to it. He doesn't want livestock on his truck, right? Okay, be'emtza haderech, if this happens mid-route, mid-journey, va'az notel bal hasfina chatzi haschar meharishon, schar hachetzi mizeh ha'acharon. And so what it'll turn out is that if the truck driver is going from Minsk to Pinsk and the guy who had originally rented it says, let's stop in the middle and let's let Yankel take over, or Shimon take over. So the owner of the truck will take half the weight, the payment of the rental from Reuven, and the other half from Shimon. He says the poskim dispute who has the burden of finding a new lessee in a situation where the first lessee decides that he no longer needs the transport in the middle of the route. The Yesh Omrim, the Im Hamaskir Yachol Limtso Adam Lahaskira Mutal Alav Lasos came. Vim Lo Asakain, Ein Lo Alasocher Klum. There is an opinion that says that as long as the driver is present, and then all of a sudden the renter says, I don't need to go any further. This is all I needed to go. I thought I needed to go all the way to Pinsk, but I found the buyer in the middle between Minsk and Pinsk, and so I don't need you anymore. So then it would be incumbent upon the owner of the truck to find a new renter.
Are we presuming that there's no contract to take him all the way?
It could be. I don't know. In other words, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Who is he quoting here? He holds that there's a machlokas, the Tur and the Rambam on this position, that if the owner can find another person to rent the truck, then it's his obligation to do so. And if he doesn't do so, he has no claims against the renter. Vimlo nimtza adam acher sheyiskarena, yesh omrim detzarach hasocher harishon lases lo schar kol haderech shedubar b'neihem mitchila. He says if he can't find another renter, he says, where am I going to find a guy? This is a little small hick town that you decided to stop the journey on. How am I going to find somebody else? So then that would be a situation where the original lessee would have an obligation to pay for the entire trip. V'yesh omrim demehachatzi hasheni ein tzarich liten lo ela kepoel batel umenakalo hatorach shel halachas asfino shar hotzos hakruchos bazeh b'chein ikar. And then he brings a third opinion, which is the opinion of the Shach. And the Shach says like this: let's say I hire a guy to drive a truck full of my cargo from Minsk to Pinsk, and in the middle, in between the two cities, I decide I'm going to unload my cargo. I don't need the truck anymore. The guy says, what am I going to do? You hired me for this whole journey. Now I got an empty truck. So the terms are that I pay you like a poel batel, which is I do have to pay you for the rest of the journey, but I don't have to pay you as I would have paid for a driver to schlep cargo. Number one, there's no more cargo. Number two, you don't have to drive all the way to Pinsk now, but I do have to pay you for the time that you had allotted for the job. So you have to determine what would the guy normally get for his time, and that's what you have to pay him. If, and poel batel means what would a person be willing to take to not have to do the job, but still make a living at the same time. And so that's not always easy to calculate. It all depends on the person's occupation. If a person's a physician or a lawyer, and he has and he's used to making so much an hour, so then you'd have to pay them more if you're basically turning down the job in the middle. So that's what you'd have to pay them. So it turns out that it would be a little bit less. It wouldn't be a lot less, but it would be somewhat less than the full payment, and that would have to be negotiated.
Rabbi,
So,
a couple of things. First of all, could I ask you to lower your camera because we can only see the top of your face?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm so gratified that you want to see my whole face.
Since you're not wearing a mask,
Okay.
we might as well just see the whole thing.
Okay.
That's a lot better. Thank you. And I guess he's saving some marginal amount by driving with an unloaded truck, and maybe the fuel consumption is less. But it seems like if he could get someone for the whole trip, and now he's got someone for only half a trip, you've defaulted on your agreement. Like I still don't get it. Like I appreciate,
right?
It still seems problematic.
So when there's a contract that says you have to pay the full amount, so you have to pay the full amount. But apparently over here, this was done on a handshake, and the deal was you're going to transport all my goods. I don't need you. Now you're going to see some examples of this. Let's say I hire a cab and I don't need the cab anymore. Call an Uber. And at some point, you do have to pay the Uber driver something for his time, but you don't have to pay him for the whole trip to go to the airport, right? You do have to pay him something. It's the same idea.
Right.
Yes, I contracted with you that you were going to drive me to Pearson, right? You get to my house, and all of a sudden I realize the flight was canceled or something else happens. So I have to cancel the Uber, but the guy came already. So I have to pay him something, right? Do I have to pay him the full amount, what it would cost to get to Pearson? Or can we settle on the fact that, look, you can get another job. There's other people you can pick up in Thornhill. So I have to pay you something, but I'm not going to pay you the full amount that it would cost to drive me to Pearson. It's the same principle, right? He says, ulafizeh, and that's why the next halacha pops up. He says, hamazmin besocher rechev linsoa lamakom ploni. You hire a driver to take you to a certain place. V'achar kach rotze laredet be'emtza haderech. And now you want to get off in the middle. You hail a cab in Manhattan, and there's a heck of traffic, a hunk of traffic. You see the meter accumulating, 50, 60, 70. And you say, this is crazy. And it's another 5 blocks. I'm just going to walk the rest of the way. So, ein tzarich l'shalem lo mehachatzi hasheni, rak Kifi poel batel kimavur. He says you don't have to pay him for the rest of the journey, except you do have to pay him something for the time that he had allotted to drive you the whole way. So in the case of the cab, you probably don't have to pay him anything because there was no time allotted in that situation. But let's say you hire a driver to take you to Pearson, and then you have to cancel. Well, he makes appointments throughout the day. So he's a private driver, and that's what he does for a living. He does airport runs, airport shuttle, and you cancel. So you do have to pay him for the time that he had now that he can't get another customer, right? But it doesn't have to be the full wage for what it would cost to drive to Pearson, okay? Right. No, you're not giving him half the money. You do have to pay him for the rest of the journey, but not the full amount. It has to be something that where you're paying him for his time, but you're not paying him for his labor. So there is a middle ground. That's called poel batel. Pay a guy, look, I don't need your work anymore, but I realize that you took off the time. So I'll pay you for your time, but not for your work product. So it is different. So for example, I'm a well, I'm not a good example because no one pays me by the hour, right? I just get a regular salary, right? But let's say I'm a lawyer, okay? I'm a lawyer and I charge $300 an hour for my services. Is that cheap today? All right, I charge $500 an hour, okay? You make an appointment to meet with me, and 5 minutes before the appointment, you cancel. So do I have a right to charge you the full $500, which was for a consult and to maybe draft some paperwork? And, so I don't have to pay the full 500, but the lawyer is entitled to be compensated for that hour that they blocked off on their calendar. And how much would a lawyer be willing to take to just be able to play video games instead of practicing law for an hour? So you do some sort of calculus, and it's not so easy to figure that out. But right. But that's what we're talking about. He says, amor heicha shekavu schar l'chol haderech. He says this whole halacha is where they had established a price for the entire trip. Okay, I'm taking you from Minsk to Pinsk, and it's going to cost $1,000 for the transport job. Okay, from taking your cargo from Minsk to Pinsk. Okay, and then in the middle, halfway from between Minsk and Pinsk, you decide, I don't need the truck anymore. I found a customer on the way, and I just need you to stop here. And so I'm not going to pay you the full 1,000, but I'm not going to pay you. But you brought me halfway. So 500 for sure I owe you. Plus, instead of paying an additional 500, maybe it'll be 250, maybe it'll be 300, 400, but it's not going to be the full 500. Aval has mazmin monit, benisia ironit. He says, but if a person hails a cab and it's on the meter, so it's within the city, right? So it's on the meter. That's what the word a meter is, a moneh, right? The customer may have said, I want you to take me to the kotel. Okay, so I hail a cab in Jerusalem. I say, I want you to take me to the kotel, right? But if it's on the meter, I have a right to terminate the job at any time and just pay you for the amount that's on the meter. I see there's like a huge traffic. There's pekak, right? That's an important word to know in Hebrew. Yeah, a cork, right? There's a traffic is jammed. So we're a shy lereid be'emsa haderech u'lishalem lefi hamoneh. So you can just say, let me off it here, and I'll just pay you what I owe you on the meter. Yeah, yeah. Because why? Because there wasn't a fixed amount that was contracted at the beginning of the journey. It was, I'll pay you by the meter. Okay. He says, and let's say you hire a guy based on how many hours he would be driving for you. So, and you pay him by the hour. If you stop in the middle of an hour, you have to pay him for the full hour. Because where's he going to get another customer for that hour? But you don't have to pay him beyond that hour. You say, I'm paying you by the hour, and we'll decide how many hours at the end of the job. But if there is a standard practice in that particular industry or in that particular locality, so you have to abide by the rules of that locality and that industry. So that would be another criterion, okay? But basically, what we're seeing here is that when you terminate a job in the middle, there are a number of different criteria that are being detailed over here. Number one, what were the terms of the contract? Was it for a full job? And if it was for a full job, then what is my obligation to you if we abort the job in the middle? Okay, so that's the standard halacha that we've been learning, is that when the job is aborted in the middle, I have to pay you for the time that you had set aside to finish the job, but I don't have to pay you for the full amount of the labor or the work product. Since you're only doing half of the work, I don't have to pay you for the full amount for the second half of the journey, okay? But I do still have to pay you for the time that you took off.
Stop there, then the job is over. You can't do that. You contracted this guy's time from here to here, and then in the middle of the thing, so this is, I got it taken care of. That guy just lost all this money because now where's he to get another job?
So here's the thing. So that was what we saw before. Let's say the guy has a network, okay? And there are things like that. Let's say there's a whole network of cargo companies, and there's one guy in Rochester also. And he can just as easily drive your stuff to New York, to New York City, or he could pick up a job in Rochester and take it to Atlanta, right? He could. So that's the thing. If he can easily get a new job, so then you're off the hook. The first customer is off the hook. If he can't, so then you have to pay him. Then you'd have to pay him for the remainder of the job.
I presume he has an obligation to mitigate the loss. So
yeah, you have to mitigate the loss, exactly. So the only question that remains is, do you have to pay him the full amount, or can you pay him like a pole bottle, which is slightly less than the full amount, because he's off the hook from having to go, let's say, to the whenever you're traveling with cargo, you have to go to the scales, right? You have to be weighed periodically, and maybe there's additional, I don't know, I'm not a truck driver, but I would imagine that when you're driving heavy cargo, there's additional gas, right? And there's also, if it's very windy, you have other considerations. You have to drive more carefully. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. Next. As has been explained in the laws of Mitzia, that if the same halacha will apply if the that you can subcontract the driver as long as the driver was with the truck, even if a family member of his is with the truck. So he says, Ayin Siman Dalet Sif Lamed, V'hadamrinan Da'al Das Banav Shel Hanifkar Hu Mafkid. And what we mean to say is, I think the last part of the halacha, what we were talking about is not when the owner's family member is present, but the lessee's family member is present. That's what he was talking about. That's what was confusing to me. What we're saying basically is that if the guy who leased the truck decides that he wants his son to take over the job, right? And he wants to sublease it to his son or let his son take over, then there's no difference halachically. It's as if it's the same lessee. Because whenever a person entrusts his object to a person that he trusts, there's an implicit trust of all of the other family members that live with him as well. And that's what we said with the laws of Mitzvah.
But I presume that wouldn't extend to an employee of the truck owner.
Not necessarily to an employee, right? But it's only with children who are dependents of the father. If they're not dependents, they're adult sons, so then it's a completely different person. Because in that scenario, the truck owner could say, I trust your dad, I don't trust you. I don't want to leave the animal or the boat in your possession. And furthermore, and they have to be adult children. They can't be minors as well, right? So I guess another consideration would be is that let's say I lease my truck to a 45-year-old man, and he wants to let his son drive the truck instead. He's a 19-year-old kid, right? So there's a contract that you have to sign that when you lease a vehicle, you have to specify any other driver that's going to be put on. You just can't let someone else drive. Someone else drives. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So we'll hold it here for today, and then we'll do some likutim and tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.